Hello and welcome to Chapter Chat with Sarah. Here we share true life stories. In Chapter 11 of my book, Healing Your Life, Isabella dreamed about how her life was going to be. She said she wanted to be awesome, striking, and bodacious. Isabella was our guest on episode 6 of this podcast, and she shared with the listeners that she made a lot of bad decisions and choices that took her life and her children's life down the wrong path. She urged listeners to reach out to resources and ask for help, something she said she wished she had done sooner. BetterHelp is one of those resources, and they are the sponsor of this podcast. They make it their mission to make starting therapy easier, to help you with making positive changes in your life. With over 7,000 reviews and a 4.3 rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform you can trust and one that will match you with the right therapist based on your completed questionnaire. To get started, go to betterhelp.com/Sarah Shaw and receive 10% off your first month of therapy. You can also find this link in the podcast description and on my website. Once again, the link is betterhelp.com/Sarah Shaw. Previously on Chapter Chat with Sarah.
I think culturally, religiously, at least in the United States, in the Christian realm, failure of marriage really is a negative mark more for women than it is for men. I did not understand what a red flag was because when you're living in a sea of red flags and that's your life, it's normal for you. A red flag and how you feel when people treat you poorly, that becomes a normal feeling, so that's just what you expect.
Today's guest is Catherine, and she is chapter 15 in my book, Healing Your Life. So in continuing our conversation from last week, I guess I want to ask you about while you were married, because we jumped ahead to being divorced and what, you're dealing with through that. But there was a couple of instances while you were married that turned to him being abusive and, had you decide that, this wasn't the way that you wanted to live. So is there one part that is vivid for you or as a memory that is still very, front and vibrant that you say that you're so glad that you ended that and that you're on a different path now?
If we're talking specifically about the portion where I was married to him, I would say the biggest memory that jumps out when you ask that question is I was about 10 or 11 weeks pregnant with my son, and my daughter was close to about a year and a half. And I remember my daughter has gastroesophageal reflux disease. So what that looks like in a toddler or a baby is, it looks like spit up or vomiting because their sphincter mechanism between their esophagus and their stomach doesn't work properly. And my daughter had gotten sick because her father had overfed her. So she had gotten sick in her bed. And we were arguing, and I was holding my daughter in my arms. And I don't remember exactly what I said, but I remember the comment being, I feel like you're not a very good parent because you just do what you want, not what's best for the kids. And he turned to me and grabbed my head and slammed it into the wooden closet doors behind me. And he held it there while he screamed in my face about how dare I tell him that he's not a good parent, and what a piece of, I probably shouldn't curse on the podcast, what a horrible human being that I am. And, what right do I have to judge him because of how horrible it was this huge, I can't remember all of it because the panic of having someone physically grab you and slam you into something while they're screaming at you and you're pregnant and you're holding your baby. It was traumatizing. I remember freezing while he's screaming. And when he was done, he walked into the living room and I immediately went back into my bedroom and with my daughter, and I closed the door and I locked it. And I could not fall asleep. I was like, should I call the police? No, I shouldn't call the police. He didn't mean it. He didn't mean it. Part of this whole, circle of toxicity in these types of relationship is a narcissist victims tend to be empathetic. So you're always looking for a way to excuse their behavior. Like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. It was my fault. There's nothing anyone could say that should ever make them grab their pregnant wife and physically and verbally abuse them in front of their daughter who's in your wife's arms. Like there's no exception to that rule. Something in me was finally triggered and I recognized that that wasn't right, but I could not get past making excuses for it. So when he came back to the bedroom and pounded on the door about 8:30 in the morning, my daughter had fallen asleep in my bed, and I got up and I let him in. And he yelled at me for locking the door. How dare I lock the door? This is his bedroom. He grabbed clothes, took a shower, and left the house. And that's probably the biggest moment because that was the first time I can remember thinking, maybe I should call the police. Maybe this isn't how it's supposed to be. Maybe what I did wasn't bad enough to deserve his reaction.
Indeed. I can imagine the fear. You're pregnant and you're holding your baby girl. I mean, I just agree that perhaps was an awakening right there that, okay, this is not headed in the right direction and I need to do something about it. There was another instant that now I'm recalling in the book that there was like a chore list that he never felt that right. I know. It's like, okay, this is not good either. That was like you never measured up, you never got it right, you never did enough, and that was another way of putting you down constantly to kind of diminish your self-worth so that you felt less than him and not good about who you were or what you were doing. So can you tell the listeners about that? Because I think there's so many of us that suffer through something like that.
Yeah. When you pick out a story where, your head slammed into a wooden door, that screams obvious, right? Anybody who would look at that from the outside would say that's obvious abuse. But the pieces that we miss, the everyday abuse that isn't just loud and in your face. I was raised that the woman was the one who took care of the home, made it a home, and did all the chores that kept a home running. So even though I worked full time and my ex-husband worked full time, when he was done with work, he got to go off and hang out with his friends and do whatever he wanted to do. And when I got off work, I got to go grocery shopping or, make dinner every night and clean. And he would constantly make comments about how the house was never clean enough. It was never good enough. You could never be a stay-at-home mom, because that was what we talked about before we got married, that I was going to be a stay-at-home mom. You could never be a stay-at-home mom because just you being home creates such a pigsty that there's just no way. The home is cleaner when you're not there in it. So you have to be at work.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. And my argument would always be like, well, here are the things I did today, but I could never prove it, right? So I thought, well, I'll just, on my lunch break at work, I'll just make a spreadsheet. I'll divide up chores into like daily, weekly, and monthly chores. And things like, daily is like vacuuming, making dinner. Weekly is like grocery shopping, things like that. Monthly is more like raking the leaves. It's not something that happens all the time. So I did it. And for a few weeks, I introduced to him. I said, hey, this is so that when you get home, you can look at this spreadsheet and I'll put my initial by everything that I did that day. So that way, even though you're not here to see me doing all this stuff, you can reflect on this sheet. And I said, and you're welcome, to use it as well, because I'm probably not seeing things that you're doing. So it went on for a few weeks. And I remember him coming home and he grabbed something out of the refrigerator and he looked at that sheet with all of my initials on it and not one of his. And he scolded me. How dare I try to make him feel bad? He contributes to this household. I was a horrible person and trying to make myself feel better by making a spreadsheet where it looked like I was doing more work than he was doing. And the reality is I was doing much more work than he was doing. But how dare I make it look like I was really the only one contributing when, he was really just out there helping his friends with their home projects, not just out. He could be out at the bar. He could be cheating, but he wasn't. It was always this hodgepodge of making me feel horrible about myself. So I never used those sheets again. I never used them again. I just continued to do the chores that needed to be done and continued to hear him talk about how I was a horrible housekeeper and never did anything and lazy and blah, blah, blah. It's weird thinking about things like that.
It's a lot to bring back up again. It is,
It
but
is.
it's so important to share that. Like you said, it was an everyday type of abuse. It wasn't just, the pushing, or it was the control that he had to maintain over you and to keep you down and feeling bad about yourself. So, how long were you married?
9.5 years, almost to the day.
Wow. Wow. Okay. And what you can say that you have from that is you do have two beautiful children. So that is, the best way to, remember it. But it was just a horrible, you know, marriage to have lasted that long, and the recovery from it is ongoing.
Absolutely. They actually have come out now with studies of people who live in long-term abuse situations. And again, we're not just talking physical abuse, we're talking mental, emotional, financial, because all of those things have a physical effect on your body, even if no one is touching you. The stress response, cortisol, all that stuff. Um, it impacts your brain. I don't want to say causes brain damage because I can't remember the study. I read it, I think, a year, maybe 2 years ago. But they're starting to see that there are long-term harmful effects to survivors of all sorts of abuses.
How could there not be? Because you are definitely, it's PTSD. It's always kind of reflecting on, I wasn't good enough, or what did I do wrong, or how could have, been better, and it's ongoing. So it's terrible to have lived through that. I mean, this podcast brings those people to all the episodes where they have something that they went through. Maybe it's child abuse, it's, a bad marriage, it's domestic abuse, it's addictions to alcohol or drugs, and it is an effect. And so what we're saying is, and the purpose is that, you know, we do go through these things in life, and there's a path for us to take to try to heal, to get better, to recover, to make the rest of our life better, and to learn from it. So I think, Abbigale and Catherine, in the book, that what you're doing is you bring so much joy and pleasure from your music. You also speak at events. I know at Family, Child, and Abuse Prevention Center that you speak, you attend their events, you support. So you're contributing back from the things that you suffered, your experiences, and then you're bringing joy and happiness and lessons for all of us. And today, what you're sharing with us is going to help so many people. Like I said, I've learned from you, and it's just a blessing to have this connection and us to be a part of each other's lives and what we're doing together. Which, before we close, I want you to please tell us, what are some of the upcoming events that you have? How can we reach out to you? What is your website? Because you are just not local. You travel, just like you shared in the very beginning, all over. So tell us more about what that looks like.
So you can find me on all of the social media platforms. I'm even on TikTok now, much to my daughter's chagrin. But you can find my website. It's www.abigalerose.com, and that's Abbigale, and then rose like a flower. And there I have videos you can watch to hear what I sound like. I have events posted. If you're on Facebook, I try to post weekly places that I'll be. But yeah, you can find me just about anywhere as long as you spell my name right. That's the key, because there's a few Abbigale Roses out there.
When did you, I think for the listeners too, this was very impressive to me, and I have to say how proud I am of you for starting this career. This is how you make your living and support your children. So can you tell us just a little bit about getting started? And this is your job. This is what you do. And I just cannot say enough good things about it, because I was like, oh my gosh, this is so brave to just have taken this avenue and then just to be so successful at it.
Well, thank you for that. I don't really look at it as being brave. it was kind of a last ditch effort. I used to work in offices basically, and no real skills or education that would set me apart for a higher up position. And I ended up losing my job with my last office position with an auction and real estate company. And I'd already been divorced for a few years at that point. And I had always loved singing. And, I had moments where I would daydream that I would be able to be on stage, but I had convinced myself that I wasn't good enough. Now, a lot of that came from my lived experience in marriage, but also, people want to be supportive, right, of most people. So I would, if I sang something at church in the early days when I was still married, people would tell me how great I was. And then someone else would sing something inevitably at church, and it would be like, ooh, that wasn't very good. And then I'd see those same people tell them like, oh my gosh, that was so amazing. So I actually thought, wow, I must not be very good. So I kept myself from it for a long time, but I was in my early 30s at that point with 2 kids, and I was like, I don't think that I could survive working another office job because it means I can't be with my kids. It's a struggle to have young kids who young kids get sick a lot. Especially during the school year when they're surrounded by their peers, and employers don't like to employ people who take time off to take care of their sick kids. I mean, I can't be there producing for them because I needed to be home. So it was kind of a last ditch effort to do something that I really love. It brings me joy when I sing, and to do something that gave me non-traditional hours. So during the day, I could be home with my kids and take care of them. And family members were able to, because they worked first shift, watch my kids in the evenings when I would perform. So really I'm very lucky that I decided to finally try it out. And it's really because I met a musician who heard me sing, and he said, wow. And he's a successful musician at the time. He said, wow, you could do this. And what I didn't know is he just meant like I could probably work a full-time job and make extra money on the side singing. He just told me this year that I have progressed further than he ever imagined, and that he just thought, I would make extra money. He had no idea for 7 or 8 years I could take care of me and my 2 kids solely from performing music. So it's you got to do things even when you're scared of them. That's what I tell myself a lot. And that helped me get into something that brings me joy, and I hope brings other people joy.
It absolutely does. And see, you are brave. And that's how I saw it. For someone who was beat down and diminished for all those years being married, who, he was trying to ruin your self-confidence, for you to get on stage in front of people and sing and excel and be so good at it. It definitely was courage. It was definitely very, very brave. And you're showing so many others that look what you can do, believe that you are a good person and that you deserve better. And that's what we want the listeners here to know, is that, you don't have to settle. You don't have to stay stuck in a bad marriage and be abused. That move on, you deserve better, and you can be a success at something that you love to do. So could you tell us about some of the outreach work that you're doing here locally, the organizations, places for people to turn, the importance of finding those resources, and some of the talks that you've done for television and also at special events?
Sure. I do want to note, because you mentioned something about being brave in the last question. I want to be very clear that everything I'm about to talk about now, about like finding local resources, the only reason I was able to get to that point was because something happened to my daughter, and that was post-marriage, the thing that changed everything for me. It got me into therapy. It made me an advocate. It set me on the path to find community members, professionals, to become my support system so that I could start healing. So I want to recognize that it wasn't because I just looked at my life and thought this wasn't right. It's because it directly impacted, obviously impacts both my kids, but there was a situation that directly impacted her that was life-changing. And I decided that that's when I was gonna write that song, because I wanted to tell a story that so many of us recognize, because we've lived portions of it. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to be on local news broadcasts and to play the song and to talk about the significance of it. I have received services from the YWCA and from the local chapter of Family and Child Abuse Prevention Center in this area. I also want to acknowledge that while all abuse is bad, there are some cases that are extreme, and it is not uncommon for women and children to lose their lives when they try to find community support and leave. It is not an easy process. It is dangerous in many cases. So I always want to advocate, like, find local resources. Go someplace safe, like a library. Don't have that search history on any of your personal devices. Go to the library. Find local resources. There are therapists. There are places like Family and Child Abuse Prevention Center, places like RAIN, places like YWCA that are out there that can help put together a plan to get you out. My sister's best friend that I wrote about in the song was actually murdered. She tried to leave over a dozen times and always went back, because once you leave, there's the fear of financial stability. The abuser often comes back and begs you that, they're going to change. This is going to happen. That's going to happen. And you believe it, right? Because you love them. So you really need to have services in place. There are grants that can help you be able to pay for those types of things. There's so much out there. I don't even know all the resources. I just know that they're important. And I really want to highlight that there are people out there who think, well, it's just bad, so just leave. And it's not that easy. It's not just being brave. It's not any one thing. You really need to acknowledge the danger and then seek out the professionals that can help you. Be careful.
That's so important. And thank you for sharing that there are resources. And again, you don't have to stay stuck. You don't have to think that there's no place to turn, because there is. You just have to do as Abbigale's sharing. You need to get out, go to the library, ask, look, and find somewhere that can help you, because you're not alone. I think I want to just add one more part to this, and that is we together will be going soon at the end of the month to Orlando, Florida. The book, Healing Your Life, is up for an award through the Florida Authors and Publishers Association. And we're going to also showcase Abbigale Rose and your music. And again, we're so grateful to be recognized that the book with the true stories and true life for so many people is being recognized and is up for an award. And we'll come back and do another podcast after that experience, what we learned, who we met, who we talked to, and what our journey is going to look like going forward. So again, Catherine in the book and Abbigale Rose, thank you for being here today, and look forward to our upcoming trip.
Likewise, and real quick, I want to thank you for being someone who believes the survivors when they tell you what has happened to them, and not only believing them, but giving them a voice, because their voice is something that gets lost when they're in those abusive relationships. So thank you for being that, and for letting all of us tell what happened and giving us the chance to connect with other people, because as you've talked about on this, you're not alone. There are a lot of us out here. There's a lot of similarities. So thank you for being that, for writing the book, for having this podcast, and for being a source in this community.
Well, thank you for that. So more to come. And, we want others to follow us, reach out, and we're there to help you. So you can, again, reach Abbigale Rose on her website for her music, and follow me on my website. So again, thanks. Have a wonderful day, and looking forward, like I said, to our upcoming trip.
Thank you so much.
So that's all for today. Before we go, we want to let you know that both of these books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many other bookstores. You can also follow me on my website, sarahshaw.org, Facebook at Sarah Shaw, X, Instagram, and YouTube. For all of our YouTube listeners, please become a subscriber. Your listening can make a difference. Please tune in next week for a surprise guest who is also an author and who will take us down a completely different path. Until then, remember this verse. This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Psalm 118:24.
You've got to run.